Welcome to the Stronger Than Steel podcast with your host, Austin Davidson and John Keir, talking Steelers all the time. Now, here's Austin and John.
Hello, and welcome back to another edition of the Stronger Than Steel podcast. My name is John Keir, and joining me as always is my co-host, Austin Davidson.
Yo.
It's Season 5, Episode 3. It is early on a Monday morning, and Austin and I are going to be talking about cornerbacks today. So not much, obviously, going on since our last episode, but we didn't get a chance to get to NFL and Steelers news, so I figured now would be a good time to kick this episode off with that. So what's going on around the NFL, Austin? It's been a handful of weeks here. What do you want to start with?
I really want to talk about the Panthers, man. The Panthers doing what they did is so stupid. So, to get to it, the Panthers traded Trey Turner for Russell Okung straight up. I waited, and I waited, and I waited for there to be something saying, yeah, the Panthers also got the Chargers' second-round pick, and then the Chargers got the Panthers' third, or something like that, or anything. But no, it continued to be a straight-up trade, and I had never seen something more pathetic for a trade ever. I have no idea what the Panthers are doing when the Panthers are supposed to be getting younger and cheaper. Younger, cheaper, better. That's how you do it. You go into a rebuild, that's what you're aiming for. They achieved the opposite of all three of that. They got worse, older, and more expensive. I don't know how they managed to mess this up so bad. There's literally, I can't find a single reason why, unless internally there was something wrong, that Trey Turner was traded. Trey Turner's been a Pro Bowler 5 of the 6 years he's been in the NFL. Russell Okung has been a Pro Bowler 2 of 9. And Russell Okung has 1 year left on his contract. Trey Turner has 2. Trey Turner's contract is at $8.5 million. Russell Okung's at $13.5 million. Nothing in this has made sense for the Panthers in any facet. And even Trey Turner went on Twitter, and Jerome McCoy, his teammate with the Panthers, was like, they even doing this to my man Trey, so it doesn't even sound like he wanted out. It's not even like he begged for a trade. I have no idea what the Panthers were thinking or what they were doing and how they didn't get a pick out of this. But honestly, good for the Chargers. You know what? The Chargers are going to the Chargers are the team doing the rebuild the right way. They got the younger, better player. They're going into a draft that's full of offensive tackles and a market that's full of offensive tackles. And so they can build their line that way. Do you have anything to add about that trade? Because I still don't get it.
Well, I'm just looking at an article from USA Today talking about it, and a tweet from Billy M_91 states that the Panthers have a league high in dead cap room from contracts that they've traded, and it's a whopping $37.5 million, which is over 3 times more than the second place team, which is the Jaguars, with just over $12.5 million. So essentially, the Panthers paid $10 million and turned 2 seasons of a 26-year-old Pro Bowler into 1 season of a 30-something-year-old tackle who's coming off a season where he missed 10 games. And he didn't just miss games due to a regular injury. He had a life-threatening heart problem. A pulmonary embolism, to be exact, and he hadn't ruled out retirement in December. So, as far as this article goes, it grades the Chargers with an A and the Panthers with an F. This is one of the most hardcore fleecing or trade rapes, if you will, that I've ever seen.
It's terrible, man. There's no excuse. I really hope that the Panthers gets they decide, nah, we're not doing this. I know, you're not, as a GM, you don't listen to the public and what they have to say. You have to do you, but I really hope that after seeing what everyone thought of this, that they reconsider what they're doing here. I guarantee you they could get a better deal somewhere else, or get the Chargers to at least throw them a 6-round pick, throw them something. I am so shocked that they're letting this happen, because obviously this isn't official yet. This trade's just agreed to in words until March 18th when the new league year actually begins. So.
Well, like I told you before, there has to be something between Turner and Matt Rule, or some sort of falling out, because there's no other logical explanation for why this could have happened.
Yeah, it's just so stupid. I really don't understand. But you want to talk about the other trade? Because the other trade I like much better.
Oh, you're talking about the A.J. Bouye trade?
Yeah, I like that trade. The Jaguars have traded cornerback A.J. Boye to the Broncos for a fourth-round pick, and I like that for both teams. I mean, honestly, people are shouting at the Jaguars that they got fleeced, but the fact of the matter is Boye wasn't as good without Ramsey there, and then he's also very, very, very expensive. And the Jaguars had like literally the worst cap situation in the entire league. They were in the negatives going into this year. They needed to unload a bunch of contracts, and they needed to unload big ones. And unloading this contract immediately put them back into positive in salary cap space for this year. So overall, to me, it's a good trade. And I thought the Broncos got a great guy. The Broncos are going to be having Bryce Callahan finally get to play after they signed him the last offseason, and now they have A.J. Boye to go along with him. And I believe they still have Kareem Jackson under contract for 1 year. I believe they signed him to a 2-year deal, if not 3. So I think I like their cornerbacks they're going with because it sounds like they're going to move on from Chris Harris Jr. But overall, I think it's a great trade for both teams, regardless of what people said about the Jaguars. What do you think?
Yeah, moving on from an aging Chris Harris and replacing him with an A.J. Boye, who is coming off a rough season, but that's still a nice upgrade, and for only a fourth-round pick, that's a good deal. In the Jaguars, as you mentioned, they're in a rebuilding stage as well. They have to offload some contracts, and that's a good way of doing it. So that's a good move for both teams. As far as the whole stupidity thing goes, do you want to continue that theme as far as what's going on in the NFC South? Because it's not just the Panthers, apparently.
Yeah, man. So going along to the Saints here, the Saints have given Taysom Hill a first-round tender, which is very interesting. He's a 30-year-old quarterback that has attempted 15 passes, and, giving him a first-round tender on top of the money that apparently he wants to be paid a starting quarterback money, or eventually be starting quarterback. I think the Saints made a mistake. I don't think anyone was going to go near Taysom Hill. I don't think if you put the smallest tender on him you could. I don't think a team was going with him with what his asks were for a 30-year-old quarterback. Incredible move by the Saints, very big-brained. They really, really like Taysom Hill. I don't get it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really confused by all these arguments that they think he's a franchise quarterback. I mean, I guess this type of move supports that thought, but nothing I've seen makes me think that he's a franchise quarterback.
Not at all, dude. It's laughable. It's just Taysom Hill just doesn't he can't go off a guy that's got 15 snaps. Yeah, sure, he's a cool gadget player, but he's not to me he's not a quarterback. He's a gadget player. That's what he is.
And if you look at Pro Football Talk and the agenda that he's pushing, did you see that he said that he had said something along the lines of the Saints started Teddy Bridgewater instead of Hill because they didn't want to drive the free agency price of Taysom Hill up during the offseason, and that's just the most insanely laughable notion I've ever heard. You start the best player to win the games, and that was Teddy Bridgewater.
So dumb. The narratives being made up to defend the guy that's thrown less than 20 passes is incredible. I'm all for the players, man. I want players to get paid, but it's just this guy doesn't deserve $30 million, and a first round tender to protect him by the Saints is just ridiculous. If someone pays him, even if it's the Saints, man, I'm gonna be so disappointed.
I was telling you this earlier. I would find it pretty funny if a team like the Patriots, because they did this with Emmanuel Sanders a few years ago, back in 2013 when he was a restricted free agent. They signed him to the minimum amount of the tender as far as how much it's required when that tender is given, and it was only a 1-year deal. So it's a gamble because if the Saints don't match it, you have to give up a first round pick. Actually, I thought it was 2, but you have to give up a first round pick for it, and then he'd hit free agency in a year. But that then forces the Saints to either let him go or accept it, match that offer, and then he becomes a free agent next year because you can't use the franchise tag on him after that. So a team could theoretically possibly screw the Saints for doing this.
And that would be funny. It's kind of what I'm hoping for. I feel like they should be punished for doing what they're doing.
Do you think that Hill is going to ultimately be the quarterback that starts the first game after Drew Brees has retired?
I don't even know. I really couldn't tell you. I wanted them to keep Bridgewater. I don't know if that's with them keeping Taysom Hill. I don't think that's a possibility. But I mean, I guess that's what's going to have to happen. To be honest.
Alrighty, what else is going on? Some footnotes here to take care of.
After all the trade news and all that pessimism, we're going to continue with actual more pessimism, as I said that. Jets defensive lineman Quentin Williams has been arrested for criminal possession of a weapon at an airport. Apparently he didn't have ammo with it. He just had the gun, but he was still arrested. So far, nothing from the league saying he's going to be disciplined yet. I don't think he will be. But, he's illegal. It was legal in Alabama. It just wasn't legal in New York, the gun he had. Then going forward, Redskins have granted Trent Williams permission to seek a trade. The Jets and Browns are the teams that initially seem interested. Do you have anything to say there?
About 2 years too late, but better late than never.
Yeah, man. I mean, now they're just trying to get draft capital, I think. But
could have gotten a lot more last year.
Austin. Oh, I'm sorry. What?
Could have gotten a lot more last year.
Oh yeah, but that's Bruce Allen's fault. Now he's fired, so now they kind of are a little smarter. Snyder's still an idiot. Anyhow, going to the Chargers. The Chargers have aimed Austin Eckler to a new 4-year, $24.5 million deal. That includes $15 million in guarantees, and they have also mutually parted ways with wide receiver Travis Benjamin. Anything to say there?
Seems like a lot of money for a running back, but he's almost like a receiver on top of that, and he's the best running back on that team.
Yeah, honestly, I love that contract. For only $6.1 million each year for a guy that catches as many passes as he does. It's basically like you're getting a wide receiver that comes out of the backfield because he's not really going to add much in the running back department, but where he is going to add is in the passing game. And for what he does, I think that's a deal. I think that's a pretty solid deal. And then Travis Benjamin, I haven't really been a fan of his for a while, so I mean it makes sense. He was pretty high paid by the Chargers, and they're also going to a rebuild. They need younger players here.
Alrighty.
Sorry, I forgot that there's more to the list.
You're good.
Former Steelers linebacker John Bostic appears to be re-signing with the Washington Redskins. This is going to be his second stint in Washington if it does go through. It has not been made official yet, but there is interest by both sides, so he will probably resurface with the Redskins.
Good for him.
Yeah. So then the Eagles are letting Jason Peters test the market. The talk is the Browns are already interested as well. The Browns seem to be taking interest to the offensive tackles in the market in this draft because they need to rebuild their offensive line. And Jason Peters is the next. Do you have anything to say there?
Nope.
And I found this funny. This is more just sports news than anything, but the ESPN is currently trying to trade for NBC's Al Michaels to try and pair him with Peyton Manning, which they're also trying to sign Peyton Manning to a rich sportcasting deal to beat out Tony Romo's. Nothing exactly yet, but he will be. Nothing's coming through yet, but they are trying. I don't know exactly what you trade in the media world. Are they going to give him like Booger McFarland and stuff? But I found that funny. Then the Cincinnati Bengals are looking to trade tackle Cordy Glenn, but they will release him if there is not a trade candidate. It seems like Glenn and the Bengals weren't getting along last season when it came to his injury, so this seemed inevitable. But I mean, Cordy Glenn was their best offensive lineman, so this is pretty bad for them when their offensive line is already trash, and they're about to bring in a rookie quarterback that's probably going to be put into a dumpster fire with no offensive line. So there is concern there. I think that the Bengals can find somewhere to dump off Glenn, but it's so bad for them. They couldn't retain the one offensive lineman they got. Anything to say there?
Well, it also does. If you're trying to trade someone, you're tanking someone's value by saying that you're going to release him if you can't find a trade partner.
Exactly. I mean, they probably, that must be that they're just trying to expedite the process. They don't even care. They're just like, we're getting rid of this guy.
And then as far as the broadcasting goes, it doesn't matter for ESPN until they start broadcasting on ABC, because not enough people are going to see just ESPN instead. So that doesn't matter. And second of all, why, like, I don't know. I find it bizarre that they're looking to try to trade for Al Michaels at this point. He's 75 years old. I mean, how many more years is he going to be doing this?
I don't know, man. I mean, apparently they're just trying to grasp at anything, get someone familiar that people like. I don't know, man.
You know what they can do? One thing that'll really help? Replace Booger McFarland with someone else.
That would help tremendously.
So, I don't know. ESPN's broadcasting of Monday Night Football has really gone downhill over the last few years. Pretty much ever since John Gruden left, it's just been in tatters. And it's been terrible. It's hard to watch Monday Night Football.
They've been experimenting a lot, and they haven't found anything that really works well. They've brought on some bad people. Was Jason Witten part of ESPN when his short time?
He was basically Booger before Booger. Like he was bad. The difference is Jason went straight from playing into color commentating, and he had no experience in it. And unlike Tony Romo, who's a natural at it, Jason Witten was like most people who, they struggle when they first start doing something like that. And ESPN didn't seem to think about that because they just threw him. They basically took him and they were like, all right, you've never done this before. Let's put you in the biggest stage that we have to offer. Let's do that right away. So naturally, it didn't go well. And, here we are 1 year later, and we've got a guy in Booger McFarland who's supposed to be much better at it and still sucks at it. So they've got a lot of work to do, and I wouldn't mind Peyton Manning. I think Pat McAfee would be interesting, but clearly what they have now is not working.
I was just going to say Pat McAfee. I think Pat McAfee is one of the best guys to listen to. I feel like what they're worried about is they're going to get cursing on air by accident with McAfee, but we've seen McAfee do games before as like a practice thing, and he does it really well, and he's just so fun to listen to, and he's interesting, and he's got stories to go along with it.
You can dump the audio on broadcasts.
Sorry, what?
You can dump the audio on broadcasts. It's slightly delayed. You can't do you can't do it indefinitely, but if you watch XFL games, you'll hear the audio cut out for like 2 or 3 seconds. That's them dumping the audio because someone cursed.
I didn't know that. Okay, so that's interesting. So there's really no reason to not sign McAfee other than he's got his own show and might not be interested.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's the move. That's the risk that they should be taking. Not with Jason Witten, not with Booger McFarland, with a guy that's shown that he can do it so far and that he's interesting to listen to. I think McAfee would be great because we don't even know Peyton Manning's going to be good. This is just like an assumption that he's going to be good. I haven't heard him commentate.
Well, at the very least, he's a charismatic guy and he knows the X's and O's, which is a good start. And then the last thing that we were going to talk about was, according to ESPN, apparently some of the owners are actually hoping that the players don't pass this new CBA, Austin, and they're hoping to get a chance to revise it to get an 18-game schedule. And my response to that is just like, when is enough enough? Like, I'm fine with 16 games. I can live with 17 games, but 18 is pushing it like way too much. Like, enough is enough, man.
I think it's a lie pushed out by the owners so that it's a reverse psychology. It's if you don't pass it, there's going to be 18 games instead, and they win regardless in their heads. I think that this is just a ploy to get them to pass it because it's scaring players into saying it's going to get worse if you deny it now, which could be true since the owners technically. It feels like the owners have more power because they have more money than half the NFL. Probably, the entire NFL. But the top 10% of the NFL players can survive with a lockout. The bottom 90% probably cannot. So compared to the owners don't care regardless. They just want more money and they want the NFL to keep going, but they'll be fine. So I think it's just trying to push them to just approve this one, get it over with, so it doesn't have to go into revision. I'm sure they will make it worse if it does go into revision, but I think this is mostly just to pass the one they currently have.
Well, it could also be reverse psychology from the other aspect too. Well, not necessarily reverse psychology, but you think about that 90% majority that is going to most likely say yes to this deal because they need that extra game check. All of a sudden, instead of one extra check, you get two. Maybe that makes them more likely to not pass it then. But we all know that 18 games is where they're going ultimately.
They're going to get there probably eventually, but I hope I hope this passes and we don't see this CBA.
Yeah, and it would be an 11-year deal, the CBA, and I could live with 17, but I don't want any more than that. That is more than enough.
I don't want it to get watered down. I like the games where they're at it. It's why football is one of the most exciting sports and one of the most watched sports, is because it's not watered down. There's not 80, 72, 156, whatever. I'm making up numbers because I don't even know what all the seasons are really. But it's watered down as it gets to more games. But I think it's good at 17.
And what you see is all those major sports. So the NBA and NHL are at 82, and the Major League Baseball is at 162. All three of those sports have talked about shortening their regular seasons. The NFL is the only one looking to expand it. At some point, you will hit that saturation point, and truth be told, like I kind of already said, I've kind of reached that point, but I mean, I guess people will continue to watch it, but the other thing to consider is that it's such a physically demanding sport that the quality of the product that you see right now is going to become worse if you make a 17 or 18 game season.
I totally agree with that. It's going to become worse. There's going to be injuries that go into a lot more injuries that go into the playoffs and stuff like that. You're not going to see more of the best players and stuff. It just gets worse at a point, like you said.
And on top of that, there's going to be less practice time involved with this too. So you think the tackling is bad now, it's going to be even more horrid, and there's going to be less time for details. There's more games, but less practice, which means more sloppy play, more terrible games, which means a worse product overall.
Maybe. Honestly, the league is becoming more offensive, so I feel like it impacts defense more. But overall, I feel like it plays into what they want. I feel like it's putting the league in their direction. And with stopping, tackling, and stuff, it's going to make it a more offensive league, so they have a more college football. I hope it doesn't get to like that, but yeah.
Well, it's not just that, but you have to think that offensive line play is going to continue to degrade across the league. Offensive lines are going to be pretty bad, and quarterback play is going to suffer as well because they don't have enough time to continue to improve in a system. Unless if you're starting, we've already heard this problem over the last CBA is that backup quarterbacks get no reps at all. So unless if you're starting, you're basically the same player you were last year.
That's a shame. Yeah, it's just with the reduced practices, it's just not a good idea to keep extending games.
So that's kind of where we're at. But anyways, enough of that. We could spend plenty of time talking about that. We're talking about cornerbacks today, a position that has been in previous years very high in the Steelers in terms of potential need in the draft. But this year we have it as a pretty low figure this year, and that's because the Steelers have their top two outside guys set. They've got a restricted free agent in Mike Hilton, their starting slot corner, but they've also got Cameron Sutton, another slot guy, a third-round draft pick from last year. They seem to be relatively set, and the big thing is they have their starters in place. If the Steelers draft a cornerback, they're not drafting a guy that's going to be playing on day one or really at all this year besides special teams.
Man, for sure. I think that what the Steelers have currently is a really good rotation. I mean, you have 5 pretty capable cornerbacks in Hayden, Nelson, Sutton, and Hilton. And then, I'm sorry, I said 5. I meant 4. I mean, that's if Hilton comes back, but I feel like there's a good chance Hilton does play for the Steelers this year. But that being said, then there's Justin Lane, who you have developing. He's a pretty high draft pick last year. So I feel like they're pretty good in that regard. What I do worry about is the future, and losing Artie Burns, while not actually a loss, there is one less cornerback on the roster. I mean, you have Alexander Myers. If he makes it, he was a guy that people were projecting was going to be one of the long shots to make the roster in preseason before he got hurt. But I don't have that sort of belief. I feel like there is room to add here because you look at it, you have Joe Hayden for one more year, you have Cameron Sutton for one more year, you have Alexander Myers, who doesn't really count for anything in my mind, as 1 year, and he's an exclusive rights free agent in 2021. But then you're losing Mike Hilton next year, for sure. He's no longer restricted, and Mike Hilton the Steelers don't have the money to pay him. And Cameron Sutton's been really good. So if you're going to pay someone, you're probably going to pay Sutton. He's the younger player, but regardless, it's just with all those 1 year contracts, like there's going to be so much turnover. It's almost, I think quarterback's a bigger need than a lot of people think here. Because first of all, you are losing a cornerback here. You're losing Artie Burns, so it's not like there's no cornerbacks leaving this year. So you already have an open space for one, and then you look at how four could possibly be gone next year, or three, and then one is exclusive rights and doesn't have a good shot at the roster right now. So I think cornerback's actually a decent need for the Steelers. I wouldn't be happy with them taking one in the first their first three picks, but for a fifth rounder or sixth rounder or seventh rounder, if they were able to get a fifth rounder, I wouldn't be mad with the cornerback being taken. I think that it's going to be a need in the future.
See, what you need is to improve the depth and basically add to the back end of the roster at this position. Say what you will about Artie Burns, but starting experience is very valuable in this league, and he had that.
Exactly. So, and losing that is a big deal, and he was playing special teams as well. So I don't. It's just going to be tough. It's tough to say with that they're going to go in the year. They're going to go into this year without adding another corner somewhere, because I feel like having only 5 corners on the year. I mean, again, maybe they take Alexander Myers and they have a 6. It's tough. It really is.
Well, they're definitely adding more because 5 is not enough to go into training camp. So we know that they're going to be adding more. It's just a matter of where they'll be getting these guys. In terms of the 3 players with 1 year left and possibly 4 with Mike Hilton, so you've got Myers, Hilton, Sutton, and Hayden. I'm actually just going to remove Myers from that list. Of those 3 guys, Hilton, Sutton, and Hayden, who is most likely to get an extension?
I think it's going to be Sutton.
I agree
think
with you.
Sutton makes the most sense because he's young. He's shown some really good abilities coming out of the slot. He's actually shown a little bit better than Mike Hilton last season, which I love Mike Hilton. I would love to see him not go, but he's going to get paid somewhere else. He's going to go. And then Joe Hayden's just older. It's tough. Hayden's still playing at a high level, really high level, but it's just going to be for his price tag and the Steelers having to pay T.J. Watt soon and probably Juju, maybe James Conner. It's just going to be tough unless he takes a discount, which I don't know if he would. It's hard for an older player, even if he's playing at such a high level. But yeah, you think Cameron Sutton too?
Yeah, well, the Steelers' history was signing defensive players who are over the age of 30. They almost never get more than the veteran minimum, and Joe Hayden is obviously worth more than that, barring some sort of horrific collapse this season, which I don't think anyone is anticipating. I would think that Hayden's probably gone, and the thing about Sutton is, unless if there's injury that forces him to play a lot more, he's probably a lot more affordable on a short extension, maybe a 2 or 3 year extension that you could probably get away with. And who knows what Justin Lane is? I mean, you could have possibly Lane and Nelson being your starters in 2021, and then you only have to worry about one more starter. But I do think that Sutton is the most likely extension candidate, with Hayden probably walking next year. And it's been quite clear for the last 2 seasons that the Steelers coaching staff seems to like Sutton more than Mike Hilton, or at least they want him to be on the field more than Hilton, because Hilton's been fine, but they both have different types of games, and it seems like for whatever reason the Steelers value Sutton more.
Hilton is so much better against the run. Hilton's one of the best run-stopping cornerbacks in the NFL, which is weird to say. He is one of the, I think, in terms of defensive backs, he's at number 3 for tackles at or behind the line of scrimmage from a
from a DB, and it's quite wild
yeah.
because he's only 5'9", but he's pound for pound the toughest guy in the team, and the issues with his play don't really come there. They come from his coverage, and that's where Cameron Sutton kind of excels. So they're kind of polar opposites, but the Steelers seem to value the coverage ability more. At least that's what it feels like. Maybe it's just because they drafted Sutton, but it sort of feels like because they've benched Hilton in the past for Sutton. I feel like they're not necessarily pushing Hilton out the door, but they've made it quite clear that Sutton's more their guy.
Yeah, man, easily. And that's why it makes sense for them to extend him.
So what kind of tender do you think Hilton's getting? I think he's going to get a second rounder.
I think so too. And I wouldn't. I think a team could take a risk for that, but I'm not exactly. If I'm being honest, because honestly, I don't know if I talked about this on the podcast, but I see Hilton as possibly a trade candidate, as someone that for a 1-year rental that he's going to walk away next year, and you're probably going to get some comp pick for it. He's going to factor into the formula, but you could get a pick like right now, and I wouldn't expect it to be high for a 1-year rental, but who knows? I mean, the Raiders gave up a 3rd-round pick for Martavis Bryant, so anything's possible. And I'd be okay with a 3rd-round pick for Mike Hilton. I mean, yeah, it hits your cornerback depth pretty hard, and now cornerback becomes absolutely a higher priority because now you have like 2 holes at cornerback, and the future isn't looking good. But I think that Hilton being with a 2nd-round tender is okay, because I'd also take that 2nd-round pick. And if a team wants to give the Steelers a 2nd-round pick, another one to dip into this class of like wide receivers and tight ends, I'd be more than happy with that.
I see. So, I guess the big thing that they're going to have to figure out is that potential comp pick that they might get from Hilton. Is that going to be something that outweighs what you might get from him right now? And you also have to compound what you're losing on the field by not retaining him. I think that they're just going to tag him. They're going to tender him and then let him walk next year.
I think so too. I think it's what makes sense. And if a team takes him, they take him.
So if you're looking at drafting a guy, it's probably going to be later in the draft this year. But you've got to add a couple guys, and with the Steelers strapped for cash, I don't see anything more than some veteran minimum guys in free agency. But I still think you could add 1 or 2 names here.
Yeah, I think it's possible that the Steelers just grab another quarterback in free agency and get like a veteran minimum guy, like just someone cheap that's out there. I don't know exactly who at the moment for cornerbacks, but it might just be better to just draft one in round 7 or something.
So with that being the case, Austin and I have 7 total cornerbacks to look at today, and because I have 4, I'll go first. And let's see, I'll list them real quickly. I have Dane Jackson from Pittsburgh, Bryce Hall from Virginia, Isang Bassi from Wake Forest, and A.J. Green, I'm not related to my knowledge, from Oklahoma State. So I'm actually going to start with Bryce Hall, just because he was one of my favorite players that I've looked at so far this year. Lost my place here. So Bryce Hall, standing at 6'1" and 202 pounds. I watched his games. A lot of these guys, they didn't have a ton of games from this season, so I watched Bryce Hall against Duke in 2018 and then games at Pittsburgh and at Notre Dame this year. So Bryce Hall only competed with the bench press at the combine, so he was inactive otherwise. Part of that was due to injury. But just a brief overview about Bryce Hall, senior quarterback from Virginia. He had a really great high school career. He played wide receiver and defensive back, but was only a 2-star recruit coming out of, I think it was Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Virginia decided to sign him or make him a scholarship offer, and they did give him meaningful snaps immediately as a freshman. He played in 12 games, actually started 7 games in total as a freshman, had 2 interceptions and 4 pass breakups. And then he upped the ante his sophomore year, started 13 games with 47 tackles, 1 interception, 9 pass breakups. And his big jump was in his junior season. He was named first team All-ACC. He He had 22 pass breakups, which led the entire FBS, and had 62 tackles with 2 more interceptions and 2 forced fumbles. And he probably could have declared, but decided not to, and it might have been a bad decision because he had a broken ankle that caused him to miss, I believe, 7 games at the end of the year. He only started 6 before he had to have surgery, and he had just 20 tackles and 4 pass breakups at that point. So from the games that I watched, I saw a lot of good things about Bryce Hall. He's got pretty good size, as you would note from what I had mentioned right at the offset here. He's got a desirable frame and length for an NFL quarterback. And he's versatile in terms of where he lines up. I saw him lining up on both the left and right sides of the defense. And I saw him lining up in press man coverage and off a little bit. I even saw him in the slot a little bit. He's got really good recognition and instincts on short routes. And he's willing and aggressive when he has to converge on a ball carrier in zone coverage. He seemed pretty comfortable in zone coverage, and he has an excellent closing burst, and he's pretty quick in transition. He broke up a ton of passes in college, and you saw this quite clearly on his tape, whether it was from 2018 or 2019, and he could have had even more if he hadn't been injured in his senior season. He led the FBS in one season and with his pass breakups. So this was a guy that was around the football often and made plays on it. He's got effective ball skills. And you can tell there was one play, I think it was the Duke game, where he saw the ball coming and he was covering a wide receiver in man coverage on a posted route, and he undercut the route just enough to get his hand in there to knock the ball away. It's those types of plays that really just make you feel good after seeing so many plays the last couple years, well, specifically 2 years ago, where Steelers players were in correct position to make plays on the ball, thinking of Morgan Burnett or Terrell Edmonds specifically, and they'd just flail their arms and the ball would somehow drop in. That's not what it's like with Bryce Hall. So there's a lot of things to like about him, but in terms of things to not like so much, obviously that season-ending ankle injury is going to be concerning because he didn't compete at the Combine, which means he's still not fully recovered yet. And he struggles in defending releases from press coverage. He's far better off in off coverage, and more specifically zone off coverage. He looked a little uncomfortable in press man. And part of that is because he's lacking in long speed, and his lateral transitions are clunky. So he struggles with crossing routes and in routes, things of that nature. And for whatever reason, I saw on tape, this wasn't noted but on his draft profile on NFL.com, but he seemed to struggle in defensive curl routes. I'm not sure if that was something due to zone coverage, but it felt like a lot of hitches and curls were caught in front of him. And according to NFL.com, he dropped more interceptions than most people would like. And last but not least, in terms of the negatives, he's a pretty inconsistent run defender. He is relatively sure-handed when he gets there, but his form needs to improve, as you'll probably hear me say about pretty much every cornerback I've ever looked at. He also struggles to work through traffic and struggles to get off of blocks, which, again, that's not really all that surprising. So overall, Bryce Hall, when you're talking about him, he's an instinctive and experienced outside corner. He made a ton of plays on the balls during his collegiate career. His transition and long speed is a problem right now. That could hinder his ceiling in the NFL level, but his quick reaction should at least help him offset this in some instances. He's probably limited to just a zone scheme defense, but in a pinch he can play man coverage as well, but this is not the next Richard Sherman or Darrelle Revis out there. I think he's going to become a solid starting cornerback in this league, but again, it depends on where he goes, and his athletic limitations are going to keep him from reaching that top-level starter guy. And he is going to be a candidate to switch to safety down the line when he continues to slow down. I think Hall's going to be a day 2 pick. This is a guy that can contribute to the team right away, but again, a lot of it is scheme dependent. But I did like what I saw from Bryce Hall. So he was my first prospect, and I was pretty sure he was going to be my favorite, but he is not. So I'm not going to give away who my favorite was, but he was the early favorite when I started looking at these guys, but obviously I'll expand on that later. So for the time being, Austin, you have 3 guys to look at. You want to tell us a little bit about them?
Yeah, so I'm going to start with Javelin Guidry. He's a junior from Utah. He plays primarily in the slot. He is 5'9" and 191 pounds. Guidry comes from a pretty athletic family, with his father, uncle, and brother having played college ball at UCLA. Guidry decided to take a different path, electing to go to Utah instead after coming out of high school as an all-conference pick in football and a winner of a state title in the 100-meter dash in California. He remained a multi-sport athlete once getting to Utah, finishing 6th in the U.S. Indoor Championships on the 60-meter dash. But back to football, though. When he joined Utah as a freshman, he was able to contribute a lot immediately, starting 4 of the 13 games he played in, getting 31 tackles, an interception, and 4 pass breakups. Then as a sophomore, he started 9 of the 14 games he played in and got 42 tackles, including 3.5 for a loss, 1 interception, and 9 pass breakups. His junior season was the best, though. He earned honorable mention All Pac-12 honors for his 42 tackles and 6 pass breakups. And while the stats sound worse overall, he was actually better in coverage in his junior season. He decided to forego his senior season to declare for the draft following his junior season, but what really put him on the map was his combine 40 time. He ran a whopping 4.29, the only cornerback to run a sub 4.3 time, and also only the 3rd defensive back to do so since 2006. On top of that, he had 21 bench press reps, and those 21 on the bench press were the most by a sub 4.3 runner since 2003. So pretty impressive stats for him at the combine. That probably really put him on the map. Going to the rest of his pauses, if you couldn't tell, he's really strong for his speed or is very fast for his strength level. I prefer his first option, though, because for a guy that's only 5'9" and 191 pounds, I expect him to be a little speedy, but the strength is impressive, as we saw at the combine. But he also benched a max of 300 pounds, and that's pretty crazy to me. With the speed and acceleration he has really solid recovery times, having the burst to even recover on crossing routes. Then, with his speed, he really offers potential as a gunner on the special teams units in the NFL, especially combined with the fact that he's a somewhat willing tackler. I think he could handle the duties in the NFL. Then he has very agile feet that, when paired with his body control and twitch, allow him to match a lot of routes. Then for a small guy, I saw him lay some pretty big hits and really try to get the ball loose. But the last thing is that he's been described by coaches and teammates as a guy that is incredibly diligent and is always trying to improve. Flipping to the other side of things, his size does become an issue for him at times. In the run game, bigger runners have given him issues despite his strength. And then in coverage, his length limits how he can work around frames to play the catch. In the game against Texas, he really struggled against Devin Duvernay. I believe that's how you pronounce it. It's Duvernay. Because of that. He also isn't a very good playmaker. He doesn't have high-level ball skills downfield and has no recognition of playmaking opportunities, which has limited his big play potential. Part of this is because he tends to get focused on his guy rather than keeping his eyes on the quarterback and the ball, especially in zone, because he seems to struggle a lot in zone, as he doesn't seem to get the concepts as much, which can point to relying a lot on his speed to do good. Last thing I got for negatives is that he's forced to drag down tackling sometimes because of his size. So, overall, Guidry's size is probably going to turn a lot of teams off for the most part, and he was probably considered a 7th-round pick before the combine. But man, the idea of trying to develop that speed and strength is probably a learning for a lot of defensive back coaches in the league, and I can't blame them, especially if it's true that he wants to get better and works hard to. I can see Guidry being a decent backup in this league with a chance to be even greater than that if he gets into the right system. And that would be a system that relies heavier on man, unless, of course, he worked off the field to understand zone concepts more. So, other people have said he would go between rounds 5 to 7, and I'm fairly confident because of his combine performance, he will blowing in round 5. That's a lot to work with, and he can be plugged in as a gunner on special teams immediately, even if he can contribute on defense right away. So, I like him. I like him going in the 5th, and I feel like 5th is a good prediction because, I mean, the last time you think of a Utah quarterback being drafted, you probably think of Brian Allen if you're a Steelers fan. And, you looked at Brian Allen that year. But, or at least you mocked him to the Steelers. But,
I didn't look at him. He was just, I just mocked him like it was a complete shot in the dark.
Okay, see, I remember the mock, and for some reason I thought you looked at him that year. But regardless, anyhow, so 5th round for a developmental guy to me makes sense, and the developmental cornerback specifically for the Steelers makes sense. So I did enjoy it. But yeah, that was Javelin Guidry from Utah. Who's your next prospect?
Man, Brian Allen is currently with the Seattle Seahawks. He has 3 career tackles.
That's my man. He's lit. The ex wide receiver.
Yeah, never turned into anything. Well, the next guy I'm looking at for Pittsburgh fans, you might remember him, Dane Jackson, a redshirt senior coming out of Pittsburgh this year. Standing at 6 foot and 187 pounds, he spent 5 years in the Berg. And I watched 3 of his games. I saw the Clemson ACC championship game from 2018, as well as the games against Virginia, the season opener, and the win at Syracuse, which I was actually at, so that was pretty cool to go back and watch that game. So Dane Jackson, a little bit about him. He was an all-state basketball player and quarterback in high school, and he played limited time as a freshman, but he started to uptick that as a sophomore. He started in 12 games, had 2 interceptions, 9 pass breakups, and then really, again, made another jump in his junior season, became an honorable mention All-ACC with 4 forced fumbles, which was the most in the ACC, and then had 14 pass breakups with 47 tackles and 13 starts. And then last year, he got even better, had a second-team All-ACC selection with 43 tackles, 3 tackles for a loss, 12 breakups, and 1 interception. So he doesn't fly off the screen in terms of his stats, but he's a scrappy kind of competitor, and he has a high motor. And some more good things I saw from him. I was kind of surprised to see that he allowed a completion percentage of just 42% when he was targeted over the course of his career. I guess I'm just used to watching Avonte Maddox getting burned every damn play. That's what it feels like whenever I'm watching Pitt defensive backs, because it felt like for the longest time they were thrown in press man coverage with no help over the top. And poor Avonte Maddox, I still don't know how he got drafted, because it felt like he was getting burned every damn play. And Jackson did struggle at times, but I did see a lot of really good things. He kind of excelled at press man coverage, believe it or not. And it felt like what I was watching, he stayed pretty close to the receiver's target window, especially on short routes. He has good footwork and wastes only a little motion when transitioning from his breaks. And he attacks the catch point with a vengeance. Again, he's one of those scrappy guys that plays the ball pretty aggressively. And I like that he comes up to challenge receivers when he's in the zone, and especially when the catch has been made, he'll converge on the receiver quickly. He's got a pretty good closing burst. And you usually see this from Pittsburgh defenders, especially defensive backs, compared to other colleges, is that he's a willing and aggressive run defender. Even though he's not the most polished tackler, when he has a clear path to the ball, he'll go after it. And he played on both sides of the field, the left and right side of the defense, and occasionally in the slot, and he had a lot of breakups in college. Not as many as Bryce Hall, but he had a good amount of his own. Similarly to Bryce Hall, though, his long speed is an issue, and this is a big red flag for me. He was too grab happy in college. It got him into penalty trouble, and I could see this being a huge issue in the NFL. Outside in releases give him trouble, so guys who step outside and then run like a slant or something, that's an issue for him, especially because he has stiff hips in press coverage, which means he's going to have issues either dealing with really fast guys as he turns his hips too quickly or too late to catch up to them, or in terms of guys who are running crossing routes. So basically, fast receivers are going to give him big problems, and he struggles to get through traffic. And even though, like I mentioned, he has the want to be a tackler, he's not polished right now. Because he was mostly a press man corner, he's, again, mostly going to be more of a scheme-dependent guy, and he only had 4 interceptions during his collegiate career. He also doesn't, this is another kind of going hand in hand with his grab happiness, as he doesn't turn his head around quickly enough, or as often as he needs to, which leads to more flags. And he struggles to high point the ball when going for the interception. So there's clearly some warts here with Dane Jackson, but he did have a really good Senior Bowl week. So he went from being a relatively unknown guy coming out, but he's parlayed his hard work from 3 solid seasons and now prepping for the draft process into a potential draft candidate for the NFL draft. He's a decent press man option. He's a physical player with good instincts. I think he's draftable, but the stiff hips, the lack of long speed, and lack of interception totals, if you will, could hold him back. And to be quite honest with you, he kind of reminds me a lot of Justin Lane from last season, just not as good. So he's kind of a Justin Lane light, if you will. If he can become a more consistent tackler, I think he could become a pretty solid special teams player. But for right now, I think he's just a fringe roster guy who's going to be a solid backup. And again, a lot of it is dependent on scheme fit right now. But I still think Jackson's going to get drafted. I think that his solid Senior Bowl week will see to that. I think he's going to be an early to mid day 3 selection right now, but could possibly go undrafted. I don't think that'll happen, but I could see that happening. So, got a couple of ACC cornerbacks out of the way in Bryce Hall and Dane Jackson. So you've got 2 other guys in Harrison Hand and 1 Lamar Jackson. Who do you want to talk about next?
I'll go to Harrison Hand. He's a junior from Temple. He's 5'11" and 197 pounds. Hand has some NFL ties. He's the cousin of former NFL D lineman Turk McBride, who was a second-round pick in the 2007 draft, and has played for the Chiefs, Lions, Saints, and most recently the Bears in 2013. His career was brought to an end when he tore his Achilles tendon. With the Bears in 2013, he hasn't returned to the NFL since, which, I mean, it's been... He was drafted in 2007, so that's 13 years ago now, which is tough to think about, but his career is over. Back to Hand, he didn't start at Temple. The New Jersey native decided to take his offensive and defensive playmaking abilities down to Texas and played at Baylor for 2 years. As a true freshman, he started 9 of 12 games, getting 42 tackles, an interception, and team-leading 8 pass breakups, which led him to get honorable mention All Big 12 honors, which is pretty impressive for a true freshman. Unfortunately, his sophomore season was derailed by injuries where he was only able to start 4 times in 10 games, having 13 tackles and 3 pass breakups. Following that season, Hand decided to transfer due to family reasons, allowing him to get immediate eligibility to play at Temple, which Temple's a little bit closer to where he lived in New Jersey, quite a bit closer than Texas anyway. He was an immediate 12-game starter in his junior season, having 59 tackles, 4 of those being for a loss, 5 pass breakups, and a team-leading 3 interceptions. He elected to skip his team's bowl game and forego his senior season to declare for the draft. I want to start with his negatives, because why not? Watching his tape, I felt like there wasn't anything he did exceptionally good. He just kind of felt average in a lot of areas, which could be a good thing, but I don't know. I had to go back and watch his tape again because I felt like it was so forgettable, and I was so bored. Part of it is that cornerbacks are very, very boring to watch. They only get targeted 3 times a game. But anyway, getting into specifics, I found a lot of problems with his play speed overall. Firstly, he doesn't have that burst recovery speed to be able to make up for distance loss. Then his back pedal feels a little labored. Also, he plays with tight hips that's slow how quickly he can turn around and has led him to lose ground turning to run. Then he has a delayed plant and drive from the top of his drop. And then his feet feel like they don't accelerate quick enough when it comes to the change of direction. So overall, he just feels slower. He doesn't have the regular speed to make up for his play speed. He had a very meh 40 time at the combine. Then while his tackling is probably the best of the 3 I'm going to be looking at today, there's still problems with it. Coming to balance late, which causes him to lose his positioning. And then while he's willing to lay hits, he also doesn't wrap all the time, and it's caused guys to escape from him at times. Now, going to his positives. For a corner, he has solid size and strength to work with. Then when I noticed him play, he seemed to be pretty comfortable in the zone and had a pretty good feel for it. Then he's really good at reading the quarterback, playing low to high on combo routes, as well as being able to decipher what is happening on bunch sets, finding his coverage and responsibility easily. Continuing with his coverage, he played a bunch of different kinds in college, playing a bunch of different zone concepts, press, and off-man, so he has experience with it all. From press, he has really good mirroring and punch abilities to be able to cover his man, and then he can get up in a receiver's face without drawing a lot of penalties. He really didn't have that many in his college career. Then my favorite thing about him was his willingness to tackle. I saw him want to get involved in plays and him going in and tackling people, and he keeps his head up while tackling, so overall he does decent in the tackling department. Then lastly, he runs with a wide base for additional control in his responsiveness. So overall, Hand to me is very average. He doesn't do much bad, but he also doesn't do much good either. And where he is bad, he can't really fix, because how do you fix speed? I guess he could try doing a better job preparing for opponents so he has better awareness and sense so he knows what's already happening on the play so he gets a head start. But other than that, you can't really teach actual speed. And I saw him get burnt at least twice in the SMU game, giving up the touchdown in his last time on defense in that game. I still don't really know what to think about him. I feel like being average is so much less alluring for the NFL. Like, when I think of late prospects, I like to think of developmental guys that they have something really good about them. And if they fixed such and such, if they fixed something that was bad about them getting to the NFL level, like, they could be good, they could be a great player, but Hand doesn't really fit that. He doesn't have anything he does exceptionally well right now. So, like, everything could improve. I don't know. It feels weird for a late round prospect, but I've seen a few people mock him in the third, but I'm seeing him going way later than that and see him as a 6th round pick. And I see that flat. I am fairly confident that if I were to draft, I would be giving him a 6th round grade. But who knows? I've seen guys go way higher than when I predicted them. I didn't like Ben Banigou last year, and the Colts took him in the 2nd round. And I think I projected him as a 5th or 4th rounder, something like that. So things happen. Terrell Edmonds was a 4th round. I gave him a 4th round grade. So stuff happens. But I see Hand as a 6th round pick. So who was your next prospect?
All right. The one guy that's kind of a trend breaker is Essang Bassey, the senior from Wake Forest. He's 5'9" and 191 pounds. I watched his games against North Carolina State in 2017, at Florida State in 2018, and at Clemson last year. So I got to see 3 different seasons, game from 3 different seasons for him. He was another one of those guys that was a dual threat player in high school for football, but he signed at Wake Forest as a cornerback. And he actually did play in all 13 games as a freshman, but he was just a backup. And then he became a full-time starter in his 2nd season, 2017. He actually finished 2nd in the ACC that year with 19 pass breakups and had 3 more interceptions. And he had 75 tackles. I noticed he had a lot of tackles during his career. He was an all-ACC honorable mention, then a second team all-ACC as a junior, 74 more tackles, 15 pass breakups, another interception. And then last year, 1 interception, 11 pass breakups, and another ACC selection, this time 3rd team. So I gotta be honest, I liked a lot of what I saw with Essang Bassey, especially in his first game from 2017 against North Carolina State. He stood tall against a bunch of different NFL players in that first game. You think about guys like Ryan Finley, the quarterback, receiver Jacoby Myers, and running backs Nyheim Hines and current Steeler Jalen Samuels. He played well against all of them. And in his last game against Clemson, he did a pretty good job going up against T. Higgins, who's going to be on an NFL roster pretty soon himself. He's a pretty darn good wide receiver prospect. I mean, he didn't shut him down, but he did a pretty good job against him. And the big thing with Bassey is that he was a 3-year starter. You know, when you get guys that are playing this much, you're going to have a pretty good chance to get to the NFL because obviously teams have a lot of tape to comb through with you. And even though he didn't have a ton of ball production, he had good enough ball production in terms of both breakups and interceptions. And unlike a guy like Dane Jackson, he has fluid hips, which allow for much smoother transitions when he's changing directions. And he attacks receivers in front of him when he diagnoses a play. I noticed this a lot. For whatever reason, actually, I think I know the reason, but Dane Jackson and Bryce Hall didn't face as many wide receiver screens. The teams that Wake Forest was playing, they ran those a lot more, and he was a big, aggressive downfield guy whenever he diagnosed the play quickly. Felt like he was reading the plays very well, and I felt like he has good anticipation and field awareness in general. And when he's 5'9" and he's going up against these big receivers, you've got to be a tough physical competitor, and he certainly is. He's willing to put himself in harm's way sometimes against these bigger players, not just bigger receivers and sometimes tight ends, but also a guy that's willing to stick his nose in the run game, kind of like Mike Hilton, not quite to that degree, but he is a guy that also has that want to. But that size works against him, and that's obviously the big concern with him is that he's only 5'9", and whenever he was beaten in college, it was generally just by bigger receivers. You're not just going to get bigger receivers in the NFL. You're going to get better good receivers, or better big receivers, I should say. That over-aggression I had talked about, which can be helpful, is also a double-edged sword because it can lead to big plays. Double moves in particular were things that he struggled with. He gave up a couple touchdowns in the tape that I saw. on plays like that, and also plays where he missed tackles. And even though he does flip his hips quickly, he tends to do it in an untimely manner. He'll do it either too late or he'll do it too quickly, playing his hand to the receiver. And if it's an option route that the receiver is running, it'll make it easy for him to decide what he needs to do. His body also travels faster than his feet, so he ends up being unbalanced a lot of times, which is obviously not what you want to be if you're in coverage. And even though I mentioned, he's a guy that loves to get involved in tackling, he's not very, polished with it, and he really struggles to get off blocks. Bigger receivers just overwhelm him at the point of attack. So there's a lot that I liked with Essang Bassey, but the size concerns are a huge issue for me and probably will be for a lot of NFL teams. But I think that someone should at least consider bringing him in. He started for 3 years. He held up against a lot of NFL talent in his days, and he produced when he was in college. He's a guy that got the job done. He's probably just a slot option, but I find it hard to believe he wouldn't be drafted. But from what I've seen, there are people that are questioning that. But I thought that he was a solid day 3 guy. I really liked his tape personally, but that was just me. So, that being Essang Bassey, Austin, you want to tell me about the other Lamar Jackson. How does he stand up compared to the other Lamar Jackson?
It turns out Lamar Jackson isn't a running back. He's actually a cornerback. This whole time we've had it wrong. He's a cornerback at Nebraska. He's a senior, 6'2", 208 pounds. He was considered one of the best safety recruits in the nation coming out of Sacramento, but ended up going to Nebraska and being converted to a cornerback instead. As a true freshman in 2016, he played all of 13 games and started 1, logging 17 tackles, including 2 for a loss. His sophomore season was relatively quiet. He started all 12 games and logged 28 tackles and 3 pass breakups. His junior year was up and down. He started 11 of 12 games, logging his first 2 interceptions of his college career, getting 5 pass breakups and also adding on another 28 tackles. Prior to the 2019 season, Jackson became a father. I don't know if it's related, but his 2019 season was his best season. He earned second-team All-Big Ten honors and Nebraska Defensive MVP for 40 tackles, 4 for a loss, 3 interceptions, and 12 pass breakups on the year in his senior season. So I'm going to start with his positives. His coverage skills are extremely good, and a few times I did see him get targeted, he made some pretty good pass breakups, feeling like he was always in the right position. Part of that is probably because he's got well above average size for a corner and length that makes it so that even if things look like they're open, he can use his length to close that gap. Quarterbacks need to have extremely good touch when it comes to him. They need to get that ball in the perfect place because he is going to use his length to knock it away. It's also allowed for him to win those go-up-and-get-him balls because he usually has the size and positioning on the wide receiver. It's definitely contributed to why he has 5 interceptions over his last 2 years. He also has decent hips for quarterbacks his size. Overall, though, his coverage again was excellent and it seemed like quarterbacks mostly avoided his side of the field when passing. Negatives, and this is where it's very unfortunate, because I thought his coverage was excellent. I was wondering why he was such a he was projected as such a later guy until I started watching more tape, because I look up highlights first. I always do highlights, then I watch game tape. Because I like to see their best plays, and then I like to just watch the tape. I usually try to avoid games that were heavily featured in the highlight tape, but that's regardless. Anyway, coming out of the highlights, I was like, I wonder what's wrong with him. Because his coverage it projects as like a second rounder, or a first rounder even. And where it all comes down to is just, I have looked at cornerback prospects in the past and have been really bad against the run game. But I say this in all seriousness, Jackson is the worst. Jackson is literally the worst against the run, against ball carriers that I have seen by a cornerback. And probably most other positions on defense, to be honest. There's just so much that plays into it, too. His 10 bench press reps shows in his play strength because I watch him get blocked out of plays by even some smaller wide receivers. And that's if he's even around the play. He will not get involved, not even if it's close to play. If he sees a runner with the ball, he avoids it actively. He won't help group tackle, and to me, that's a huge red flag. Because if you could get over and help you could at least try and force a fumble or something. You don't even need to tackle. You can just tackle the ball if you see him in someone else's hands. There's so much anger in me watching because it was frustrating. It was boring. Like, the dude was never involved even if the play came to him. Against Minnesota specifically, they tried running at his side so many times. And almost every time it got to the outside where he was, it was effective because they know that even if he tried to tackle, the receiver would block him out of the play. And that happened on one of the touchdowns in the Minnesota game. He literally got blocked out by a wide receiver and it led to a touchdown. This is because his tackling is just terrible. Form and everything. It's probably why he avoids tackling. He relies on lunging and leaving his feet behind to try and tackle rather than wrapping. And when I say he stays away from tackling, he avoids anybody with the ball in their hands, including the quarterback once he turns into a runner, which you can see a lot in the 2019 Ohio State game. I feel bad for getting rid of this dude. There's literally so many reasons why he's terrible against the run. And another thing is his instincts and awareness are really bad. Sometimes he will still be trying to cover his assignment and not see a running back is now running next to him. This happened more than once on tape. I say this like it's not just a one-time thing. There's several times where he's running with his wide receiver assignment, and there's a running back already in the second level next to him. It's just overall literally the worst run game defending quarterback I ever looked at. I'm not sure another quarterback can take that because he even lacks the ferocity to try. I have never seen a defensive player be afraid to try and smack a quarterback. Ever. It's supposed to be what defensive players love to do when they get the chance. I don't know, man. I was very turned off by that. Anyway, those are just the problems with the run game. He has some problems in coverage as well. They just aren't anywhere close to as bad. He seemed to struggle against speed, where he's starting to get grabby against guys that were only moderately fast. So I feel like he could really struggle with really fast guys. Then his lack of instincts impact his coverage as well. He fails to recognize misdirection and tries to read the receiver rather than looking for the actual football, and has resulted in less interceptions and has also kept him staying connected to route breaks. Last thing is he could lose valuable positioning while playing the deep ball. So overall, Jackson has excellent coverage skills. There are no questions about it, but with how bad his tackling and play against the run game is, it's going to be tough for him when it comes to the NFL. It would have been much easier if it was the opposite, for teams to take a flyer on, because then at least he could play special teams, but Jackson would be a complete detriment if he were to be put on the NFL special teams unit. He can't tackle at all. He doesn't help in that aspect, and that's what you need mostly. And he's not fast to be a gunner, just for pure speed, so there's nothing he can help you with. So others are projecting he would go somewhere between rounds 5 and 7, and for me there's no way a team can use a 5th on a guy that I don't think can play special teams. So I think he's going to go in late 6th or early 7th. His coverage skills are fantastic, but there's so much wrong with the other facets of the game that need to be worked on that he can't really contribute anywhere immediately, in my opinion. And it's going to make it tough for teams to want to draft him. I would like to see at the next level for him to improve his tackling skills. He needs to, otherwise he can't play. It's just not going to happen. Because if he ever gets burnt, he's never going to be able to tackle. If the runner gets to the next level, he's never going to be able to stop them. He's going to get run over. So I do see him as more of a 7th round pick, personally. I just can't see him going before the 7th round, but I'm sure he will, with me saying that. So that was Lamar Jackson out of Nebraska. Let's hear about your last prospect.
He sounds like Gerard Holloman.
Yeah.
So how much, if he's the worst tackling player, like cornerback you've ever looked at, who's the second worst, and how much bigger is the gap between them?
I think. Cause all I knew was this is like the worst tackling I'd ever seen from a prospect. I'm trying to think of my other quarterback prospects in the past that I really didn't like their tackling. Like, they are all usually, for all the quarterbacks I looked at, especially last year, I looked at second round quarterbacks almost exclusively. So none of those guys really had bad tackling, at least in my opinion. Like, they all had their issues in some facet, but like they always had something to make up for it. Now I'm trying to go back a little bit farther and think of who I looked at before.
I guess maybe not just cornerbacks then, but in terms of pound for pound and their tackling, is the only one that really struggled as much a guy like Devin White?
Honestly, I think so. I you know how much I didn't like Devin White. I think, but Devin White is leagues better than this. Devin White is probably at least 3 times better than what I watched here. I think this is a once, like, I don't think I'm going to see someone with worse tackling in my lifetime. And I've never seen someone lack, like, ferocity, strength, willingness, the ability to actually do it, staying away from plays, awareness. Like, they lacked every single ability you need that goes into tackling. Like, they lacked what's it called? I keep saying they, like we don't know who I'm talking about. Lamar Jackson lacked everything that would help with tackling. Like, he was like, if there was a bar, he was like from 1 to 100, he was like at 1 at every single one of those stats. I don't think there could be someone that ties him at the worst, but I don't think I'm going to see someone worse than this.
So what you're saying is Lamar Jackson would love to see Lamar Jackson in the hole trying to stop him.
Lamar Jackson would love to see Lamar Jackson trying to stop him, because Lamar Jackson is going to run over Lamar Jackson.
So the whole dual names here theme is going to continue with my last prospect. His name is A.J. Green, just like the Cincinnati Bengals wide receiver. This one, a cornerback from Oklahoma State, at 6'1" and 202 pounds. He's got a very good frame, all things considered. But what about this guy? What's interesting? So similar to all the other guys I've looked at, he played sparingly as a freshman, became a regular in his second season, finished with 4 interceptions in 2017 and 47 tackles with 5 pass breakups. Made the All-Big 12 team in 2018 with 1 interception and 11 pass breakups, and was an honorable mention All-Big 12 with 1 more interception and 5 pass breakups last season. So in terms of the positives, he uses that length of his effectively, and it helps him to be disruptive to attempt to contest more catches. He's got great hand use at the line of scrimmage and has a powerful punch and press coverage, and he likes to get involved as a tackler. That was always nice to see. And that length is always helpful for him when he's poking the ball away from receivers who are trying to come up with it. He's got good closing burst, and in one game in particular, according to Lance Zierlein of NFL.com, he stood up tall against Baylor receiving prospect Denzel Mims, who I'm sure we'll be talking about later on, not this show, but later on in the process. So that was good. But the negatives for him, his lanky figure kind of works against him on shorter timing routes. He's kind of clumsy, and he doesn't have great long speed. He defaults to clutching and grabbing in some situations, which, similar to Dane Jackson, is going to get him into penalty trouble. He struggles to get his head turned around in man coverage, and he struggles with route combinations and has trouble following his man out of bunch sets, which is a difficult thing to do normally, but he really struggles with it. He's also a step slow when it comes to recognizing short routes and converging on them, and he tends to play the body instead of the ball, a la Terrell Edmonds in breaking routes especially. He has shaky footwork, and he struggles to get off blocks, even receiver blocks. So I'm not sure if growing into his body is going to help him that much, but there's a concern that he might lose what speed he does already have. So even though he has a good size and length with adequate starting experience, his poor combine tests and his lack of long speed are going to limit his potential on a defense. It's, again, like with most of these guys, it's going to be dependent on the scheme he plays in. He can overpower smaller or less shifty and elusive receivers, but fast receivers and shifty guys are going to give him fits. I think A.J. Green makes the most sense in a zone-dominant scheme where he can keep the receiver in front of him and he can tackle the catch. The size and experience is intriguing, but there are too many issues for me to ignore here. Green would have made sense as a Steelers cornerback 5 years ago, but with the Steelers going to more of a man-heavy type of scheme, he no longer fits the billing of a Steelers cornerback. So I don't think the Steelers are going to draft him, and I honestly, from what I've seen, he seems like a day 3 guy to me. I mean, I guess I could be missing the mark on these guys, but I didn't like what I saw from A.J. Green. So when you were talking about Lamar Jackson, loving to see Lamar Jackson in the hole, I think A.J. Green would love to see A.J. Green lined up against him.
He would. I feel like these corners, man, their counterparts just would beat them so bad.
So we've looked at 7 cornerbacks today, and I have a feeling I know who's going to wind up last on your list in terms of how you would prefer to see these guys, the way you like these guys, and how you would personally rank them. I'll start with mine. There's the top two guys are really guys that I liked in Isang Bassi and Bryce Hall, for different reasons. I love Bassi's competitive nature. I thought he plays with a ton of heart, and I love the way that he's able to rush to the ball and diagnose plays. I felt like he has the most complete package, and he's not gonna cost much, I don't think. The issue with his size is something worth noting, though. He's probably only a slot corner. Bryce Hall and Dane Jackson, the next two guys, remind me a lot of Justin Lane. And even though Hall's probably going to be an earlier guy taken, actually, so I don't think that he'll be around whenever the Steelers are looking for someone. But his only issue that really concerns me is long speed, but I really liked what I saw from him. Dane Jackson, I said before when I was talking about him, he seems like a Justin Lane light to me, and I don't think the Steelers need that. And A.J. Green just had too many issues for me to ignore, so I have him last. So of those four guys, I'm really high on Isang Bassi, I'm high on Bryce Hall, I'm indifferent about Dane Jackson, and I'd stay away from A.J. Green.
Why not? You don't want A.J. Green?
I'd love to get the Cincinnati Bengals A.J. Green, unless if the Bengals also draft this A.J. Green, in which case I'd want one of the A.J. Greens.
Exactly. It's all fun. All fun. I kind of hope the Bengals do take him. That'd be pretty funny to have two A.J. Greens, at least for the moment.
I'd love to see the Ravens. I'd love to see the Ravens draft Lamar Jackson, and then I'd love to see him on the field, and then we could run our 225-pound running backs at him.
Oh, easily, dude. You just run to the outside, just get him, because Lamar Jackson plays on the outside. Just immediately, he's just going to get run over, and he's going to run away. He's going to see a big running back, and he's like, I'm scared, and go off the screen, because that's basically all I watched when watching his tape. I watched, oh boy, look, it's a running play. Oh, there's Lamar Jackson going off the screen. Okay, I'll never see him ever again. Bye, Lamar Jackson. Next play. And that's how it went. So, with that being said, Lamar Jackson was my last ranking cornerback. He needs to get it together because he could be great. He could be such a great cornerback in terms of coverage. His coverage is there. His coverage, I saw such a high level coverage from him, and that's what makes me really sad about it. It's to be such polar opposites, but he's not like the best. The problem is it's not polar opposites. He's not the greatest coverage corner I've ever seen, but he is the worst tackling corner I've ever seen. So it's just, I can't get behind it. I can't get behind a guy that can't contribute on special teams, like almost immediately and nowhere. I can't really get behind it all in all. I hope that some team has the space to hold on to him and let him develop and see if they could work on his tackling technique. But there's so much to work on there that I hope he does succeed, but I don't want it to be with the Steelers. I would not like that. After that, I have Harrison Hand. I like the averageness was almost good to me in the end. I was like, you know what? Harrison Hand might have the longest career of all the quarterbacks I looked at today because Harrison Hand is going to be average. I don't think he's going to be anything great, but like I said, he doesn't really do anything bad, and that could mean he could be a solid backup and role player for a team for quite a while. So I think Harrison Hand could be like a safer late round pick that might actually stick around in the league for a while. So that's how I felt about him. I didn't feel like he's going to ever be exceptionally good, just a solid backup. And then number one, I'm a gambling man, and I like developmental players in the later rounds, and I liked Javelin Gildry. I just think he was a very good player at Utah. I liked what I saw. The Steelers, you said it just not too long ago, that the Steelers are heading towards a more man coverage scheme, and that's where he's going to succeed. He's got the speed for it. He's primarily a slot corner, which I guess the Steelers don't technically need. But, I mean, with Mike Hilton leaving, I possibly next season, I would like Guidry to be there. I would be happy with that. I just like his speed. I like his strength. He has an odd combination. He's a little shorter, but I enjoyed his tape. I like that he was really good at man coverage, like I said. And there's just so much to like about him. And he'd be like a fifth-round pick, I think. So he was my number one. I like his upside as a player. Yeah.
Alrighty then. I think that just about covers it, Austin.
I think it does.
Alrighty then. We'll be back talking about running backs next time. You excited to talk about all the interesting guys that the Steelers are apparently looking to take with pick number 49? I still don't think the Steelers are going to take one.
Yeah, man, I have all the high level ones like J.K. Dobbins, Zach Moss. So I'm ready.
If the Steelers take a running back, I'd prefer they take it with their first two picks or just don't take one at all.
That's how I see it. It just doesn't make sense to throw a guy in there that's going to be a lateral move. You're taking a backup at that point after that.
Yeah, and they've been doing that the last 2 years.
Easily, yeah.
So, okay, we'll be back next time talking about running backs, but in the meantime, thank you for listening to the Stronger Than Steel podcast. If you have any questions about the show, please email us at strongerthansteelpodcast@gmail.com. And check out our website, strongerthansteelnfl.blogspot.com, where you can check out our episodes and our various social media platforms. Thank you so much for joining me today, Austin. Listeners, thank you so much for joining us as we talked about cornerbacks today. And we'll be on to running backs next time. But until then, thank you as always for listening, and have a terrific day.
Bye.
You have been listening to Stronger Than Steel podcast. Thank you for joining us today, and don't forget to check out our website listed in the description below.